There's been dramatic images this week in France of people-led protests against the government over a massive debt crisis in the country.
France is running out of time. The country is trapped in political turmoil, 5 prime ministers in just 3 years, a president without majority, and a parliament that can't agree on anything. Every reform ends in protest, and every protest leaves the country stuck. On the surface, France still looks powerful, but that image hides a painful reality. The country is buried under $4 trillion of debt, and the figure just keeps growing. And this isn't just France's problem anymore. When the second largest economy in the Eurozone breaks down, the effects spread across the entire Eurozone's financial system, from Paris to Athens. The question now is, how long before the cracks turn into a full-blown collapse? Every second, France adds another 5,000 euros to its debt, and it just keeps growing. Once a symbol of wealth and stability, it's now drowning in debt it can no longer handle. But this didn't just happen overnight, it's a story that's been building for decades. After World War II, France began a new chapter that became known as Les 30 Glorieuses, 30 glorious years of growth and hope. Factories boomed, families prospered, and France built a welfare state that promised security from cradle to grave. But behind that growth, something small but dangerous began. France started spending more than it earned, funding new welfare promises and jobs that felt right at the time, but came with a heavy price. By 1974, it had its last budget surplus. That's more than 50 years of spending more than it earns, and every few years, leaders promised to balance the books. Next time, next budget, next term. But next time never came. Then came the 1990s, a new era. Europe was coming together under one currency, the euro. Borrowing suddenly became cheaper than ever. Interest rates dropped, and France could finance its ambitions at almost no cost. Politicians called it modernization. In reality, it was a trap, one that allowed the country to delay hard choices. Generous welfare programs expanded, pensions grew, and government hiring increased. Every time someone warned about the debt, leaders reassured the public. France is too strong to fail. When the 2008 global financial crisis hit, everything cracked. France's debt jumped from 60% to nearly 80% of GDP as billions were spent to save banks, protect jobs, and keep the economy alive. But unlike Greece and Spain, France avoided strict cuts. It escaped the worst, and this escape allowed France to believe this system could go on forever. The same story repeated during the COVID crisis. France poured hundreds of billions into bailouts and healthcare. For a while, it worked, but the price was staggering. Debt exploded past 110% of GDP, meaning the country owed more than its entire economy produced. For the first time since World War II, the nation's finances were upside down. Decade after decade, crisis after crisis. France has survived by borrowing time and money, but now both are running out. To understand France's crisis, you have to understand what it's trying to protect. After World War II, France rebuilt itself on a promise: security for every citizen. The state would provide free healthcare, education, unemployment aid, and guaranteed pensions. And this has become a part of the national identity. The French welfare state is one of the most generous on earth. For decades, the model has worked beautifully. The economy boomed, life expectancy rose, and the French enjoyed one of the world's highest standards of living. But generosity has a cost. Today, France spends 57% of its GDP on public services, more than defence, transport, and every other government sector combined. Half of that goes to welfare and pensions. But the problem with this model is it depends too much on optimism, on the belief that the young will always outnumber the old, that growth will always keep up with spending. Those assumptions are failing with the rising population and the declining workforce. Productivity has slowed, jobs are harder to find, and young people spend years studying only to end up in low-paying or temporary work. The economy that once supported this grand system is no longer growing fast enough to sustain it, and every attempt to reform the system meets fierce opposition. In France, social benefits are a national pride. Even a small change sparks outrage, turning politics into a minefield. So, instead of cutting spending, France keeps borrowing. The country now spends around 6% more than it earns each year, and most of that money is already tied up in recurring costs: public salaries, welfare, and pensions that can't easily be cut.
Yeah, so indeed very important on the pension reform with this special cabinet meeting today to introduce a new part to the social security bill.
And it's those pensions in particular that weigh heaviest on the nation's finances. Pensions are France's single biggest expense, costing over 350 billion euros each year, or roughly 14% of GDP. That's far higher than the European average of 10%. In other words, 1 in every 7 euros the nation produces goes straight into retirement payments. This pension system works on a very simple idea. Today's workers pay for today's retiree, and that worked fine when the workforce was big. Back in the 1990s, there were about 5 workers for every retiree. Their taxes easily covered the pensions, but now that balance is tipping. Families are smaller, people are living longer, and fewer young workers are entering the job market. On top of that, millions of baby boomers, the largest generation in French history, are retiring. Now, there are only 3 workers for every retiree, and by 2050, that number could drop to just 2. To fix it, President Emmanuel Macron tried what seemed like a modest change, increasing the retirement age from 62 to 64. In most countries, that wouldn't even make headlines. But in France, it caused an explosion. Millions took to the street, furious that the government was asking them to work just 2 more years. Transport shut down, garbage piled up in Paris, Macron's approval ratings crashed, and his party lost its majority in parliament. When lawmakers refused to vote for the reform, he pushed it through using a constitutional loophole. A legal move, but one that backfired politically. Since 2022, France has cycled through 5 prime ministers, each falling amid public anger and stalled reforms. The country seems trapped. Reform is necessary, but reform is impossible. France's political deadlock wasn't just a national issue, it became a warning sign to the world. Investors watched the endless protests, changing government, the rising debt, and began to wonder, if France can't reform itself, how long can it keep paying for all this? For decades, France could borrow money at some of the lowest rates in the world. Investors trusted it. A rich nation, strong economy, and a stable government, but that trust has faded. In 2023, Fitch Ratings downgraded France's credit score, warning that debt was growing faster than the economy. The message was simple: Paris can't keep borrowing forever. Every time the government issues new bonds, it's met with higher interest rates. France's 10-year bond yields have climbed to around 3.3%, nearly matching Italy's, a country long seen as Europe's weak link. These signs resemble Greece in 2010, when a loss of confidence triggered a full-scale crisis. Unlike Greece, France isn't a small economy that can be rescued with a few billion euros. If investors start to doubt France's ability to control its finances, borrowing costs could skyrocket. Panic spreads quickly in global markets, and even a rumour can shake confidence. Political chaos on the streets has already made markets nervous. Financial chaos could be next. And in a global economy built on trust, even a small rumour can trigger a chain reaction, turning doubt into full-blown panic. When the euro was created in the 1990s, France was one of the main architects, a pillar meant to balance Germany's economic power and help unite Europe under a single currency. This deal was built on discipline. No country could run deficits above 3% of GDP or hold debt over 60%. The rules were clear, and they were designed to stop exactly the kind of crisis Europe faces now. But today, those limits are broken. France's debt sits above 110% of GDP, nearly double what's allowed. Italy, Spain, and others are in similar situation, but France's fall would be far bigger. It's Europe's backbone, the second largest economy in the Eurozone, and its collapse would shake the Eurozone's entire financial system. If France were ever to need a bailout, the question arises, who could afford to save it? Germany? The EU? The combined rescue funds of Europe barely add up to a fraction of what would be required. French bailout would drain the system, forcing other nations to take on more debt, spiraling one crisis to many. The European Central Bank might try to step in, buying French bonds to stop panic from spreading. It's what the ECB has done before, but this time, the stakes would be much higher. Helping France would break the Euro's own rules about debt and discipline. Other countries would expect the same help, and the whole system could lose credibility. Either choice undermines the very foundation the Eurozone was built on, but if France falls, it could mark the beginning of Europe's biggest financial crisis in decades. For 50 years, France's growth has been built on borrowed time and borrowed money. Every government promised comfort, but none dared deliver the pain of reform. Now, the bill is coming due, not just for France, but all of Europe. So, what do you think? Can France still fix this, or is Europe heading for another financial meltdown? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video insightful, make sure to like and subscribe for more.